first saw the return of Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss in a brand new adaptation of Dracula. Now, this already got my back up because as of yesterday, it went worldwide on Netflix. Not the British Netflix, but worldwide everywhere else. Australia, America, Spain, all the other Netflix hubs have all three Draculas to watch. And here it's going to be on the iPlayer for however long, a year or more, I think. So, because of this, they felt like they had to get them all out before it went on Netflix. So it meant that they decided to schedule the 3 90-minuters over 3 consecutive nights from New Year's Day. And I did see on Twitter a lot of people having fatigue at that. I do think it's a risky strategy to put 3 90-minute episodes on over 3 nights. I have to be brutally honest and say, while I can admire its scope and the look and the feel, it was never a show I was going to be won over by or that interested in. But I was interested in your take on...
It's very odd, this, because you are interested in my take. It doesn't...
No, I am, because we haven't spoken about it.
It doesn't happen very often.
Well, no, because I wondered, did you only watch 1? Did it intrigue you to watch 1 and 2? Did you then watch 3?
I did only watch 1. I'm not sure if I will go back for more, because I've been working this week. I think, as you say...
You have said this once. You get to say it one more time and
I've got a point.
I doubt it.
The 3 nights together works for most people because most people are still off work.
Yeah.
You know, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday this week. So we'll have had the time, you know, not having to get up for work the next morning, where as I did. So I watched the first one. This was sort of a traditional Dracula story, but given the sort of Gattis and Moffat sheen to it. And the first episode was sort of told via sort of flashback, wasn't it, with Mr. Harker being in a convent and talking about his run-ins with Dracula, which sort of peaked with Dracula himself arriving at the convent and being confronted by Dolly Wells' nun, who was the sort of this approximation of Van Helsing, if you will. It was good for what it was, for a sort of modern interpretation of Dracula, but my thing is similar but a little bit different to yours. Did we need a new interpretation of, you know, would it have been beneficial for these writers to try and come up with something new rather than basing it on existing property? And I didn't realise until you told me that it was going on to Netflix. And is that the reason they rushed it out? Would they have been planning to do it anyway like this?
I think the reason they did it was because in the 3rd episode, they do that typical Moffat and Gatiss thing where the story shifts and he's now in the contemporary modern world of 2020. And I think they didn't want that leaking out through other people in the US or someone seeing it and commenting. I mean, it's very unlikely that anyone would see that anyway, unless they're following the Dracula hashtag or something
I read
on Twitter.
Little bits about sort of a time jump and things like that.
Because it's a BBC property, they wanted to get it out and make it their own before it went on to Netflix.
I wouldn't have questioned it even if I had learnt that. You know, I wouldn't have questioned, they're putting this on the 3 nights because, you know, as well, I suppose the thing is that they can push back the news at this time, whereas when everyone's back to work, they want the news on at 10 o'clock.
Very true.
I mean, that does make sense. And I went to the cinema yesterday and they were trailering it as, it's all on iPlayer now. You know, we said before, and we said it in the Best of the Year special of the podcast, that a lot of these dramas now do seem to be pitched at an international audience.
Yeah.
What did you think of the performances in this? I mean, we had... Is it Klaus Bang? Was that the actor's name? Klaus Bang. What was your feeling on this? Again, I mean, this sort of performance, I suppose, isn't in your wheelhouse, really, is it?
No, I don't really feel I can give it proper critique because the performance is almost hidden under so much bravado and campness and makeup and bigger than the world that I don't really think I can give it a fair critique. I like the look and feel, and I liked all this, you know, all the spooky stuff.
Yeah,
But it
I
just
liked all the stuff with
wasn't for
Dolly
me.
Wells. I liked her lines. I liked her performance. Her sort of, and I didn't really realise it was her. I don't know if it's because she was under the habit. I thought she was the best thing about this. Interesting to see Joanna Scanlon get her head bitten off, quite literally. I wasn't really compelled to watch many more. I mean, this isn't a story that I've got a particular fondness for.
No,
I
me
don't
neither.
think there wasn't much of a final hook in that first episode. Whereas if you'd sort of seen him in the UK, maybe, something happening there, they'd shifted the story somewhat, but it still felt quite static going into that second episode. Like you, I sort of do appreciate the production values of it and things like that. I think, the gothic horror elements they nailed quite well. There was some scary moments that were executed well, but then there was sort of the comic horror as well. There's people who like this genre of entertainment, then they, I think, gravitated towards it.
Yeah.
It looks like
Yeah.
on Twitter, obviously the first episode, everyone I follow really loved it. Have seen some slight disappointment for this finale without knowing exactly what happened.
But I always feel like, and I know I've got my issues with Moffat and Gattis from other stuff they've done. I always feel like they're trying to one-up the audience, and it irritates me.
Especially Moffat. I mean, a lot of people.
There'd be nothing wrong with doing 3 more exactly in this vein if people like it. You don't always have to tease and one-up you ups all the time.
Post series 2 of Sherlock, I think he's got a sort of bigger head, I suppose, now, I think.
Much bigger, yeah.
In terms of, because that was a rousing success. I think his early Doctor Who series with Matt Smith and Karen Gillan, I thought were quite good. Once Sherlock really took off and became this phenomenon, because even the first series was sort of almost nestled away in a sort of post 2010 World Cup, where not a lot of people saw it, and it was a bit of a word of mouth hit. And I really like the second series as well, but I think I think it was the third series, which was the first that we discussed on the podcast. It became a bit too clever for its own good.
Yeah.
And
do you remember they did a Christmas special where it started off normal and then went back to, or New Year's special, I think it was, when they all of a sudden were back in, the original Victorian era of Sherlock. And it's almost like they get bored halfway through and go, let's do this now. And it's not necessarily what viewers want.
When Gattis was with the League of Gentlemen, they had some good ideas there, and his sort of adaptations of ghost stories and things like that have been really good as well. Maybe sort of it is more Moffat, Gattis has that affinity for these original stories, and maybe he's there to sort of bring the classic element into it. The sort of paranoia of the first half an hour or so, I think, was maybe my favourite bit, where he was trapped in the castle, and
very atmospheric, very well done.
Dracula started to get younger, and he the fingernails started to fall off and things like that. There is things I will remember about it. It's one of those where if it's for you, then I think you'll enjoy it and get more out of it than maybe me and you did. But then saying that, and I mentioned this for the second time, I went to the cinema yesterday, actually twice, because I got a Limitless card for Christmas, and went to see Little Women, which isn't necessarily something for me, but I really enjoyed it. So I think if you do that adaptation well, then it shouldn't maybe matter if you enjoy that sort of original text or not. But I think maybe the genre here was a bit too much, based on the disappointment a lot of people who invested in sort of 4.5 hours over 3 nights. I think that would put me off a little bit, especially as we have got quite a lot coming up that I'm more looking forward to.